When I'm convinced you're settled over there, we're going to go ahead and make a motion to second it. I'm going to interpret that to mean he's ready to go. So, any comments, questions, corrections necessary to the notes from January? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor? Okay, so we're good to go with that. Again, I think he's going to be over here momentarily, but as I'm sure most of you are aware, we're in the middle of February, and we have a contractual obligation to finish this project insofar as our contract with NYSERDA is concerned by the end of March, which means the next several weeks are going to be fairly busy for the planning department staff for certain. We have, I think, 3 meetings scheduled with this group over that time frame. I don't have my dates in front of me. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yep, sure enough. So we got a meeting on the 27th of this month. We had tentatively established a date for a meeting on March 6th. That, I guess, remains to be solidified, not the least of which is the location. So I think we were pretty certain with the date, just not the location, or both?
Yep.
Okay. We can be here on the 5th or 7th? Okay, all right. So I guess the first question is everyone locked in on the 6th, or is there flexibility for the 5th and 7th? Anybody not able to make it on the 5th and 7th? Mark? Okay, everybody else is good to go. Okay, so is there one or the other that's available? No on the 7th. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have difficulty on the 5th or the 7th? Okay. If we, so Dave, you're good on the 5th. Scott, you're definitely not good on the 5th. Okay, all right. Okay. So we'll shoot for the 7th. Brian, we're looking at the next meeting in March. We have a meeting on the schedule for the 6th. We're going to have to move it to the 5th or the 7th. I don't know if you got your schedule with you, if you have flexibility in that time frame. Right now, it looks like the 7th is the better of the two. Yes. All right. So, Dave, you think that'll be okay for you? All right. Everybody else is good with the 7th. Well, everybody was good with the 6th. People are good with the 7th. If we can't get this building on the 7th, we'll take one of those 2 days. We'll find a different venue. We'll have a meeting on one of those 2 days. Okay? All right. The next meeting after that would be the 13th of March, followed by a meeting on the 27th. The tail end of the month, and I don't have the specific dates yet, we're still trying to work those out, will involve a series of activities related to briefing to the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board and the Town Board on the proposed changes to the code. It will involve possibly hearing with the Planning Board on the proposed changes, just a hearing, and then training and orientation activities. So the training activities would be related to town staff and other folks in and around town, professionals that have to work with the new code. So it's an orientation to the new code, help them understand what's being proposed, what it might mean, and then the second one is a kind of a regional forum on the changes to our code and the project and experiences that we've encountered as we've gone through this process. Both of those will take place before the end of March as well. So the March ZBA meeting, I'm looking at John, we had identified as potentially a date when the ZBA could be briefed about the code changes. And you guys generally have pretty full agendas, so I'm going to look to you to tell me whether it's reasonable to insert half hour, 45-minute conversation about this in that meeting, in those meetings or not.
March 19th, we're scheduled ZBA right now. There's 2 items on the agenda. Expect 2 to 3 more to come in. So that's where we're sitting right now with that agenda. It's actually due Tuesday. Yeah. 18th is a holiday for the town. So we'll know 9 o'clock actually at our meeting Tuesday night. We'll know what we have tentative.
So alternatively, let me ask you whether you think ZBA board members would be willing to attend the planning board meeting in March, which would be kind of a joint meeting and then a hearing. So I think that's Thursday following the 19th, 21st, I think it is.
Planning board's the 21st.
21st. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is that something you could take up with them unofficially when you meet with them next week to see what their availability might be?
So you're saying that instead of the 19th, you would do
On the 21st.
21st.
That's correct. Yes.
Would we be being briefed at the beginning or the end of the planning board meeting? Would we have to stay for the whole meeting, or could we do it at the beginning?
It would probably be the end, I think, unless it's a public hearing item, in which case it would be up front, and that's yet to be determined. We have to solidify that. So it could be at the beginning. It may also be at the end.
If it's just a briefing, it could just be during a work session in the beginning. We could set a work session right at the beginning of the meeting.
That typically is a pretty short period of time. That's about a half hour.
What time does planning board meeting start?
6:30. So they meet at 6. We'll work it out. I just want to see whether or not there's a possibility. So right now, we're saying the ZBA meeting is definitely a possibility, pending, the agenda. And the 21st is possible, but you'll determine that amongst your members.
And I think what I'd like to do then is I would ask him to advertise the meeting. But while he's back, we could meet at 6 p.m.
So this is a briefing. This is a briefing to you. This is not necessarily a public briefing. That'll occur with the planning board. So it's really just to the ZBA. And so if you want to adjust your time left and start earlier, we could do that too.
John, we could bounce right off the members Tuesday. We kicked that around originally. Maybe getting that going at 6 o'clock.
My only input would be that ZBA meetings tend to go very late, and it would be, if planning board meetings, I think, aren't as long, right? So I think it would be a shorter evening overall if we all met the same night, and it would also consolidate your efforts to boards at once.
Let's follow up offline.
Yep.
Yep. Since on Tuesday night, I'd like 5:45 for the 19th.
We'll chat offline and get it squared away. Okay, thanks. All right, and then I think that's it right now. We'll have a better idea what these dates are, if there's any difference or changes to these in the next week or so.
Okay. Good. All right, you want to do map first, or you want to do... So we've got 2 things that we're going to try to get through today. In front of you, you're going to see a map, right? This is the map that was passed at the end of the year last year, or 2 years ago, end of 2017. End of 2017 in the comp plan with a modification to it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing that you'll see on your in front of you on your table is this is the spreadsheet that references all the changes based, from village and town, where we're going with the changes for traditional node 2.5, which are filled in. Right, today we want to try to get through the traditional corridor 2.5. The thought here is the parcels are shallower, but for the most part, the configuration stays similar. So we can hopefully we'll get through that. If we get through that and the map, then we're going to try to turn the corner and get into traditional node 4, right, which is basically 2.5, but allowing some more height. And then outlier here is traditional node 8. So, depending on how many changes we would like to see from 2.5 through the rest of those corridors, that's going to determine how fast we can move through. My goal is to get all the way through 2.5 tonight, the corridor, and finish off all of 2.5. So, let's start with the map for a minute. So if you look at the legend at the bottom, you'll see traditional corridor, and then this is an older map, and we're going to have to revise this because we have the traditional medium scale node, traditional low scale node, depending on where the nomenclature lands. That's what will show up on the key, and then traditional center. So looking at that, we've been fixated sort of on traditional low scale node, which is sort of exemplified in that. It's like 34, which is in the middle of Maine and Harlem, and then you'll see sort of that medium scale node or suggestion of where we could add more height to the mix, and then you'll see that sort of royal blue, which is corridors. So those are corridors that are intended to be sort of that lower height, that 2.5 height. But adjusting the building layout on the site for the fact that the lots are shallower. So if you look at that, then we talked a little bit in this group about 35 and 36, right? We had some conversations early on about whether those want to be traditional low scale, whether those want to shift to suburban. We need to kind of figure out where those two nodes are going to land. And then what you'll see in that sort of purple, right, that traditional center, that's going to actually say traditional node, not center. We drop the center nomenclature with the idea that in these areas we're not looking for developers to lay out the roads. The town wants to grid and lay out the roads and then tell the developer build within our gridded layout. So that involves the Ridge Lee campus, the Boulevards area, the Boulevard Mall, the area where the old Toys R Us is, and then the area over by Dent Neurologic. So, and then north of that, you see the triangle where the Marriott is, and then that area of Sweet Home over by UB. So those are already areas that have added height and mass. They're in the opportunity zone. There's where we need density in order for a developer to be able to afford to replace the big box retail, plus we have UB and possibly transit option offering some more implications as to how we should develop. So I don't know how we want to start here. To me, the big questions I have are in 35 and 36. Do those want to change, or do we want them to stay the same? Are we content with 37? Should 37 become a low-scale node? 38, 40, 39, 47, 48, are those what we're hoping for near the village? And then, the questions are, is there anywhere else where we need to sort of make adjustments? Because this is going to be our opportunity to do that. So it was a mouthful, right? So let's start with, I guess, with 35. 35 is Kensington and Harlem, right? Current designation is on this map would be 2.5 stories in height, built to lot line, all of the same setbacks and conditions that we have been going over for the past 2 months, as Maine and Harlem. Anybody have a feeling that that should change? Are we happy with those conditions there?
The conflict was about driving, correct? That's what Jackie brought up? Just-
So drive-throughs.
Right, drive-throughs. Just to make sure that we know what points we're looking at to change or not.
And some of the drive-through, we're not doing drive-throughs in the low-scale node, so in order for this to change, it would have to change to a suburban, low-scale node. Right, so we were debating over time whether or not we would want those to go away. Right, and McDonald.
I think we're better off leaving, if we have to change what we're calling it so that the drive-throughs can stay there. I think it's important, particularly in that neighborhood. That's part of what attracts business and people to that neighborhood is drive-throughs and easy parking. Because it isn't just Amherst, actually, a lot of the residents who use it are Cheektowaga, and we want to keep those businesses doing well. We don't want them to struggle.
Well, that, and you'll be creating that, and by signing it to the traditional low-scale node, thinking about it, you're going to be creating 5 huge nonconformities right off the bat.
Well, that's true, but we have barns all over Amherst that are nonconformities, and the whole, there's gonna be speed bumps and all sorts of things anytime you change a code so drastically.
You're taking the 4 out of the biggest parcels there that are actually developable and telling them you can't do what you're doing already.
I wonder whether we have to maintain the same designation for all of those areas. Clearly, the node at the circle, which has all of the drive-throughs there, might be considered different than the corridor going up Harlem Road or the corridor going up Kensington. So maybe we split them up, right? And the node is applied to in this case, the corridor up Harlem Road and up Kensington. And then
I think that makes sense.
maybe
I
the
think that
rest
makes a lot of sense.
But then what does that do to McDonald's?
So McDonald's would actually fall in the node.
Yeah, we keep that.
Yeah, I think that the thing to do is to take Harlem and isolate it, because where like federal meets are and all those things, the setbacks are already generous. I mean, so trying to pull pieces back to the street, I would say, I'd be looking to say, okay, suburban low-scale node at the node, and then cut the thing off sort of where...
As they go up more.
Yeah,
little muffler.
Yeah, well, as you break it and go up Harlem, that should then be traditional corridor.
That's the muffler, pretty much the muffler store in North, like Rite Aid.
Isn't that-
Rite Aid would be
A lot of
part
those buildings are already kind of fronting the street, right?
Isn't that
do, yeah, but they're
36
shallow,
where
and they're
you're...
shallow. I'm sorry,
Yep.
Jackie.
Aren't you talking about 36 primarily?
We're not talking about 35.
I didn't realize it went that far. Okay. It's hard to tell on this little
Yeah, sure.
map.
Talking about like Wheatberry and the optometrist, those businesses?
Those could be, I think those
That's
should have a more
taken out, yeah,
traditional form of a node,
yeah.
more of a nodal form.
I think that sounds very reasonable.
Yes.
So the only thing I'm hearing here is that McDonald's would be part of the pharmacy
That's
node,
what
or would
Brian
not?
said.
Would be, right?
What?
McDonald's would be part of the pharmacy node.
Yeah, I would just leave the area along Worley alone and just take the area going up Harlem and
Yeah.
change that.
So like from the back end of Rite Aid,
Yeah.
from the back end of the Well Now, that's coming along here. I can't remember the street names, but yeah, you're right.
Zone it so that we force somebody to put Jimmy's back. And then the second question becomes, what do you do with 36? Those are more traditional buildings
Yes.
on one side. On the other side, there's an old plaza.
But it's a shallow setback for that plaza, right?
So we're okay with that being a traditional low-scale node? Okay. Because if you knock that thing out and put a drive-through in, you'd suck up all the space where we currently have a little walkable thing.
Right, and you're backing up against historic
Yeah.
Snyder neighborhoods where you want a return to
So you wouldn't necessarily
nicer
want to
stuff.
drive.
You don't wanna
Yeah.
encourage any more.
Yeah,
stuff
that's
there.
right.
So we're gonna allow that, so 35 is gonna become a suburban low-scale node, and then that northern portion of 35 will become a traditional corridor. All right, the next questions that I have are 37. So Reichert, and Hyatt, and then across the street is, Snyder Square, a gas station, and, check-ins, but all that, everything except for the Hyatt fits 2.5 instead of saying it's gotta be 4, and the Hyatt doesn't fit 4 either. So the question here is, should we just downzone everything to 2.5 and let the Hyatt be non-existent, or existing non-compliant, because nobody's changing that out anytime soon?
I would think that's reasonable. That's the historic spine of Amherst, and so it makes sense to try to bring back something that reflects the scale of its surroundings, where the majority of the residents think the Hyatt was a mistake.
Well, in the Reichert House renovations all fit 2.5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my concern here is, you got major highway interchange.
Mm-hmm.
You have a rather large parcel at the corner of Main and Kensington that's all unto itself. There's no residences in its backyard.
Talk about Snyder Square.
Yeah.
It backs up to residence.
Well,
Right
it backs
on
up to the
Washington
residential
Parkway.
street, but, it backs up to Shackett's building now.
Yeah, I guess my question is, does that need to be more than 2.5 for that to be a successful corner?
I think that could easily go to 4.
No. No.
The argument, I think what you're saying is it could. This is an interstate interchange.
Yeah.
With Route 5.
Right.
It is a major interchange.
Well, no, it's basically almost a 90.
I'm wondering whether it would be
interchange.
better to jump across the interchange and talk about what we're gonna do on the other side,
Okay.
just to see what we're thinking on the other side before we
So the other,
decide.
the other side, right, the village side, you have 38, which is, basically, Walker Center. Then you have 40, which is the Tops area, right, and across the street from 40, which is the new Starbucks and the Lenovo, Chico's.
That side of the street should probably become a corridor.
I was gonna say, I think Scott's right. I think that corridor should run all the way on the south side, and then 38 and 40 could just become one.
Traditional corridor.
30 and 40 to me are, the village zoning's 4 stories. I don't see why that Tops Plaza, as deep as it is, or Walker Center couldn't be 4 stories.
Yeah, they really don't have neighborhoods.
I don't think
back
they have
here.
residential directly behind them.
No.
No.
If I'm mistaken, somebody correct me.
But again, under the traditional medium-scale nodes that we're talking about, they're gonna have to pull those buildings up to the street, so you're even that much further away from the residential. So, to me, 38 and 40 could stay at 4 stories. 39 becomes, 39 elongates all the way across the bottom of 40.
Well, 39 and 40, they just become one.
And then I think you wander across the village, and then you get into 47, which is a corridor, probably appropriate. My one hesitation is that there's that plaza that building at the corner of the building the Rachel's is in, at the corner of, Richfield and Main. All right, and that building really wants to top out at 4 stories. It's already 2.5, 3. And the Bevel Aqua building, that building, that would, you know, if somebody carried that straight across the face, that would be appropriate. Yeah, but if, well, I was gonna say unless Bevilacqua bought it, right?
That's about it.
But, you know, that, by calling it a corridor and limiting it to 2.5, you know, we're gonna push it into a scenario where, you know, that property probably ought to be, a traditional medium-scale node to match the village, because it sits on the same block as the village. Anybody have an issue with separating that piece?
I was thinking about the whole thing.
Well, then you move further, and it's really, it would be pretty hard to go to 4 stories with the lot configurations.
Oh, look at Anderson.
Anderson's is a holdout in the gas station. Although this doesn't go all the way to the gas station.
I mean, you could probably get 4 stories along that entire thing.
Concierge Dental's 2. Well, it's 2.5, or whatever, big dormer, yeah.
I mean, do you want 4 stories everywhere, or do you want 4 stories where it's appropriate?
I'm trying to
Because all
force,
those are much more, you know, densely residential than what's commercial the other direction, and, there are lots of opportunity places in town for taller buildings. I'm not sure why we're pushing so hard for so much height.
Can you zoom in here? I think what I'm saying is this parcel sucked, right? When the village was trying to do this, the town parcel, the village actually built over the town parcel, so you couldn't do contiguous to the village with the zoning. So if you look at it, what stymied all of the actually changing out that terrible Rachel's building, was that, you know, you would need to vary on that parcel as well. That should just be a contiguous parcel. You know, it's that could be in the future without a lot of complications. So, agreed, after that, I don't think you need to carry 4 stories, but I think at that point, it would be best to balance the block.
That sounds reasonable. I was more talking about Anderson's and the other, going down towards transit.
I'm okay with that staying corridor. I'm just saying this one parcel I'd like to see broken out. Yeah, that parcel would fit into a traditional medium-scale node.
They'll never get it unless Bevilacqua buys it.
Right. We'll let the market deal with that.
You know who made that for? You know, because the only value of that thing is to anybody would be Bevilacqua.
Can you go to Street View there?
Right, he's got the ability to provide parking and support.
Yeah, go right there, that's good.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Across the street.
there's the perplexing problem, right? You know? So, and Bevilacqua only did go to 3, he didn't go to 4.
So that's why I'm wondering if we should say 4 there, or we should say 3, so I was...
Well, yeah, but you don't have a 3, right, we're talking about a 4, so
Right.
you let the market rectify that. The village says 4.
It does say 4?
Yeah.
Okay, so then that should be, that'd be good, that's consistent there.
4 has a footage, right?
4 has,
Right.
right, but all we're saying, I mean, for the sake of this conversation, that piece should be isolated as a traditional medium-scale node. Node 4, yeah, whatever we're calling it now, okay. So now, let's go back over to, well, actually, let's stay here for a minute. So 48 is a deeper parcel, and it is a little bit of a gateway to this area, right? Granted, across the street's a NOCO, but can you drop the guy right into the intersection? If you're looking at this parcel, should that be a suburban setback, as we have a suburban low-scale node, or would we rather see traditional extended there?
I'm going for the suburban.
Right there, stop.
What do you want to see there?
That's a gas station, or car wash.
Car wash.
You wanna see a car wash there, the setbacks are at,
Well, look what's across the street from where the car wash is going.
well, I know that.
It's an open field,
That's
so.
like next to the nose.
Right, no, but I'm saying, when you cross the threshold of Young's Road,
Yeah.
you're starting to come into a more densely populated area.
Well, I'm thinking with the university on the southeast corner,
Mm-hmm.
you know, keeping a suburban setback, you know, say maybe 2 banks of parking or something would actually probably keep it more open and more of a gateway than trying to close in one side of it and...
Okay.
Well, I mean, what's the gateway to, the built, the denser Williamsville, so if you want the gateway to be more of an urban building and start, you know, Williamsville, I would think more of a traditional would be more applicable.
So the other thought there is that this isn't really the gateway, this is a gateway to a run-up, and then the secondary gateway is the school set across from a 4-story building.
Yeah.
So,
I think, I mean,
Take a look
maybe
at the
down the road, there
setbacks
might be
of
an
the
opportunity
buildings
with
that are there.
ECC to do maybe student housing or something denser. So.
okay.
See, under the last iteration of this zoning effort, we actually had that as a more dense, more height on that particular corner, and there was a couple conversations about marketability, and it looked like there was going to be some medical office in there, and it morphed into the beige color when it was a blue color. And I think I was in the minority and wanted to keep it blue. But I think that's a perfect site for some height and some density. And as we've talked about SUNY Erie, they're going through their own master planning exercise, and there's been some talk about some type of development on the south side of Main Street there.
This is about transitioning.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I wonder, because if you look at the rest of the, I granted, some of the stuff could change, but if you look at the rest of the development between the high school and Young's Road, it takes on more of a suburban character.
I wasn't saying that, you know, I want no height here. The height would still exist, but
Right. I think
the
it's more
setback to
about-
the
it's more
building would
about
be
the
greater
setback.
than it would typically be for your traditional
I think it's more
corridor.
about the setback here.
So if
Because
you're-
the parcel is large enough, it's gonna permit
So,
height.
so you could do, I mean, you could still go denser with a suburban setback there.
Yeah.
Well, we're just sort of really talking about a suburban setback versus pull the street, so. Can I do a straw poll, just, show of hands to leave it suburban setback? I didn't get a count. Did you get a count? We're gonna be split down the center. Versus leaving it at, or making it a traditional setback. We can, let's... Yeah, suburban setback with height. Okay, moving back down to 37.
What does that mean?
What? Means you can still go 4 stories, but you're allowed to park cars in front of it. So looking back at 37,
I say we leave it alone. That's 4. We just did the same thing as on the other side of the 290.
so this is a big question here, right? So right now, the map, as it was approved, in the comp plan amendment showed a traditional medium scale node. In our translation, that's gonna be a traditional node 4. So the question's 2.5 verse 4.
And what I actually think here is from Bentham south on Kensington, we need to get that down to the traditional corridor, the 2.5.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say, it needs to be 2.5.
Go down to the corridor.
Okay.
Do the 2.5 and leave the 4 up at the corner. On those, the Philip rubbers and...
So agree that going down Kensington, that's more of a corridor feel from Bentham down?
Yeah, that's where you start running into the residential area.
That fits in the two.
In a funeral home.
Yeah, it's two.
What's 3
Because
stories?
closer to 30 feet.
Yeah, but it still fits in that traditional corridor.
It still fits in that corridor.
It wouldn't be non-conforming, it would fit.
Across the street.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Is it full 3 or is it like a sub? It's not a split,
No, it's two of all,
split level? Yeah, I don't think it's,
unless there's something.
Could you specify, please, which buildings you're talking about?
We're dropping the...
so funeral home's 2.5. That's,
Yeah, that's the one we're talking about.
that's an ugly 2.5. Funeral home's 2.5.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah, what do you-
Manufactured. That's fine.
Something about that building stuff, right? Right there. That building.
That's the building.
That is only 2 functional stories, though. Only 2 stories.
But it's only 2 stories.
Yeah, we use one second.
Okay.
No, I mean the current building.
So I said the Bentham South, keep it through there.
Drive past it all the time.
Okay, so everybody okay breaking the Bentham South out into a corridor? 2.5, okay. All right, okay, good. Sweeping to the left of Snyder, right heading west, 33,
There's 4. Is that on the south side, we're talking the Main Street stuff where the LASIK Institute is
Yeah.
right there, that would be 4.
I guess I disagree with that, I think it should be 2.5, but I'm one person.
I think it's 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5 behind
That's what I
Bentham.
thought we-
All right, let's do
Well, I
a,
just wanna be clear, because we were talking both ways before, so this, basically, this entire area is 2.5.
37 becomes 2.5.
Yes.
Anybody opposed to seeing 2.5 there?
Oh.
Scott, okay. All right, so 37's becoming traditional low scale. Okay, now coming over to Main and Eggert. We've got traditional medium scale across from traditional low scale.
Was that only speaking to the HSBC building, but it looks larger than that, including the
Covers
school?
the church as well, because the church, so let's go to Main and Eggert. And drop that guy into Main Street looking at St. Benedict's.
If you're talking 2.5 and that ended up being somewhere in the 40s, that seems very high, or high enough.
So that's 3 stories now, and then if you go to St. Benedict's, so St. Benedict's, the school, not the church. Yeah, so the school is higher than 35. So the thought there is, in order to cover St. Benedict's profile plus the Key Bank profile, we're at 40 feet, or essentially, or 4 stories rather.
You're concerned that you're creating an existing non-conforming with a historic church building?
I'm more concerned about the property across the street and the density that it would take to tear the building down. This is probably about $1.5 million to tear that thing down.
So you're arguing for profitability, that it needs to be tall enough to pay for itself?
Needs to be tall enough to afford the demolition.
And, what about someone who wanted to turn it into, tutors or something like that? Return it to a residential?
You can always downscale from
You can always build smaller.
4 stories. So you can build 2.5 if the market affords it, but if the market doesn't afford it,
And then they go to the IDA and they get tax breaks to pay for their demolition?
And you got,
but you also have the building behind it.
A little bit of attack.
Be clear about what this area includes.
you have Sacred Heart plus the old school, which are both at least 3.5 stories.
I understand, but that's not, we're not worried about those becoming,
They're part of
blight.
the node.
They're historic structures that we want to maintain, but why would we want to put those buildings, those historic structures in the shadow of something else? When those are shining stars of that node.
So the other situation that we run into is if you look at the Key Bank building, what you have here is, so from Eggert to Hurdle, we're currently working on an information tech corridor. Right, so if we're retrofitting that, this site becomes one of the better locations to do that. We've got good concentration of transit services, good concentration of land mass. So is this a site that we want to maximize?
Well then, we've been splitting where it's appropriate. What if you split Harlem apart from the church?
Split Eggert.
Correct.
Down Eggert.
Yeah, because you're starting to hit a church quarter and there in residents right on the street. So it doesn't make, I understand that for the Key Bank building. I mean, it's already sort of existing and large, but then I think that it would be sad to have the incentive there to tear down those churches to build something monstrous.
I got you.
Well, Marion, it should definitely cut off and become 2.5.
Well,
I think it's Marion.
I'm actually, so wait a minute, I mean,
South
I'm
of-
wondering, like, this node includes
Sacred
this
Heart.
area here as well. So I don't think we intend for this to be any bigger than it is today. I don't know whether it's 3 or 2.5. This is the school.
I think it's
been converted to apartments.
Depends on which end of the building.
Yeah, it varies, it drops down the grade. So I agree, I would agree with that, say, let's, keep 33 the way it is, include the portion north of Main Street, east of Eggert in the low-scale node, and then take the Key Bank building and the Catalytion Center and leave them in the four.
Be careful with the Catalytion Center, so.
It's already in 4. It's in this currently,
Yeah, I know.
so.
I mean, isolating that too, just isolating the Key Bank parcel and then doing an L around it. To keep
I
it
wouldn't
cattle-
change the can you go to Street View on Eggert?
See how high that is.
So my problem is if they need to, say they said, okay, we're gonna have to do some work on the Catalytion Center, first of all, they got historic tax credits, so they're not gonna alter it that much.
Then just to do work on it, it's already been converted
It's
to
already
apartments.
2.5 stories, so.
There's nothing.
Right.
What else would you do? It's brand new, it's been brand new, but it's...
If you change the zoning and then you trigger some kind of change on the zoning, then you're going to ultimately force them to, hey, we're doing X amount of square feet of renovation, okay, now you have to look at your facade and setback and everything else. Right, don't forget, we have triggers in this thing. So, I would just say, for the sake of the Catalytion Center being where it is, so in order to get historic tax credits, they landmark the building, I assume?
I don't know, I don't think so.
don't have to be eligible.
They did.
But the tax credits run in perpetuity, like you can't alter the building later under a tax credit. So there's a state, okay, so there's those run long, they're like 90-year easements, when the state does those. Okay.
It goes with, the life.
I would just, for the sake of clarity, I would just take this area, east of Eggert and turn it into a low scale, west of Eggert, leave it as is.
I'm with that.
Okay. Now, moving west, further west down Main Street, we're looking at 29, so go to Bailey in Maine. This is a corridor, puts it about 2.5. Okay. Then you get down to the University Plaza, deep setback. Right now, we're calling that traditional center, but it'll be a traditional 8.
May I make, ask a question? 29, if we change the zoning, wouldn't that help us, some of the businesses that have been problematic have to eventually leave, like the pay-by-the-hour hotels and that sort of thing? If you bring, it has to be forced up to the street,
Only when they come in for a triggered renovation or addition, yes.
right, I mean, this could be a problem solver if you change zoning.
Right, sure, or you can
So-
incentivize those things. So if this becomes an information corridor, then yes, there's more pressure, and if people say, okay, I wanna be on this street, it puts market pressure on those businesses to sell. Even though it's going to 2.5.
But it's still a corridor, they can park along the
No,
street.
corridor is traditional corridor, they got a front on Main Street.
Oh, okay, good, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
So then 30, it would be a traditional node, which is, but it'd be an 8-story node, the way we have it.
Is that gonna work with the size?
Well, if you look at that parcel, what it would actually be most beneficial for, if we were to go to anything high, would be a hotel. It was location across from the university.
Until you incentivize infotech in the area, in which case then it goes to office building,
Yeah.
right? Because then it becomes a state incentivized information center.
What's the scale of the buildings across the street? Dorms on the
14.
Are they? Yeah, and they're top of the hill. That's true.
Brian, do you want to,
Yeah, it could be. Hayes Hall's, more.
Check. So, I mean, I'm personally okay with this because it's not set back at 8 stories. You'd have to bring the building up to the street in front, and I don't think the market or the land mass is gonna allow for 8 stories. Those are set way back, right?
Yeah, same building, squash up first.
That doesn't mean they're gonna be fixed.
Not gonna be set back forever, so we've seen a lot of concepts the university has put together over the last couple of years that shows development on that parking lot and try to reclaim that area. So it's not, those are set back, they look like they're set back a ways, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you would get, and I've seen concepts where there's a hotel up front that services the university in that area, so that would probably be multi-story as well.
I guess I'm just looking at office space. We only have 2 spaces, the one on Main and Eggert, and then this site where we can actually maximize our use of that innovation corridor strategy. I like 8, but I don't think it's gonna go 8. Everybody's grimacing, so I gather that the 8's, so you're 4 or 8, right? Those are kind of the
Well,
numbers.
if you go down Main Street, going towards the city, and a lot of the old city buildings are quite lovely, and none of them are 8, and I'm not sure it would be, I think it would be a sore thumb to have something so tall, like a Washington Monument in the middle of grass.
Okay.
So I would go for less. I would think that would be better for the neighborhood too.
Do people feel comfortable with that as a traditional medium scale or a 4-story? Yes.
I have no objection to 4 or 8.
Anybody have an objection to 4? Okay. Straw poll 4 or 8?
Mark wants to say,
Mark?
It's just that, I mean, it's my fault for it, that's
I would, I guess, go more towards 8 in that you're connected to a university, you're connected to a subway, there's thousands of students there. It's set up to be an 8. I understand, like, the continuation of, like, the 2.5, 3, but just the size of the parcel. On the flip side, it could develop as almost a campus-like with internal roads, so,
What about offering incentives on provisions in New York State town law?
I can't recall how large this parcel is, but there are provisions in New York State town law for incentive zoning where you can geographically target a site or sites, and be flexible in what you may want there. You're incentivizing development in exchange for public amenities. I think it's 261 for 261B in New York State town law. So if there's some geographic areas of significant size, we may want to look at that. I know it throws a whole new wrinkle into it, but you may want to treat some areas really distinct.
So the interesting thing here is if you look at 31 and 30, one of my personal pet peeves, or one of my personal goals, is going to be to see, they're both major bus transfer locations. And so if you drive, right, if you're fortunate enough to be driving down Main Street, you watch cars literally splash the people sitting at benches along Main, and then turn the corner and, May Gen, that parking lot is, that front space that they have is basically a bus stop with people kind of hanging out either in the sun or elements because it's the Main Street to Kenmore transfer station. So, I'd be okay giving up some height or playing with some things if you could get internal, bus pullovers, and actual good bus transfer stations.
The provisions in the town law, New York State town law, allow for exchange of monies, public amenities, and it doesn't have to stay with that particular parcel. You could ask for anything within the area.
Well, but so to do that, you would put a traditional node 4 and then have the developer talk to you, and if they wanted to get a 5th or 6th story, you would say, hey, we would like to barter basically around, around a public transit hub.
You give us a bus shelter, we'll give you 8 stories.
Would that be in competition with the subway where they had that big bus pull-in? How far away is it from there?
So the issue is, even with that bus pull-in,
yeah,
the Main Street to Kenmore transfer requires you to be on the street on Kenmore Avenue or on the street on Main Street. So people aren't crossing and going into the big bus hub to pick up the Main Street bus. They get off Kenmore, they walk to the front of the Tops Plaza and wait.
It's more than
or they walk the other way and wait. And either way, they're sitting exposed. And to me, they're such major transfer stations that we're just asking people. I watch people with kids, I watch elderly, they're just getting destroyed by the elements. So.
Okay, no, I actually I didn't know if it was a swap for that. If it's something totally different, that sounds like a very good idea.
It's a specific transfer, route transfer. In fact, across the street on UB's front, there's the opposite transfer that happens, and you see people piled up right next to the street in all kind of weather. If I gotta watch one more kid sitting outside in like 4-degree weather because they're waiting for a bus transfer with their parent, it's gonna drive me nuts. So we have to fundamentally do something different.
You're talking about the facility at Bailey?
No. So right here, right where that van is.
Right across the street, the bus stop across the street.
Right, but right here, swing to your right. That bench is a major transfer station from Kenmore to Main Street, and then swing around all the way so you're looking at UB. There's a truck. So they're right there. There's a bus stop. That bus stop is the Kenmore to Main Street East transfer, and that's it. The two of the busiest bus routes. Their transfer locations are 6 feet from a major arterial, and people don't fit under that stall. That one I can't help because it's in Buffalo, but the other side we should do something about. So back to your point, Dan, you make it a traditional node 4, and then you sort of bait the bait the hook and say, hey, listen, I'll give you a story if we can help the people in front of your building.
You could geographically target that site.
As an incentive zone, and if there's other unique properties, you could do the same thing. Essentially, it's an overlay zone, but it recognizes, and again, I want to say it's 261B of New York State Town Law. It allows for the town to capture public amenities or monies in exchange for density, height, or anything of that nature.
Can you look at Maygen for a minute also? And then we're gonna move on with this conversation because we gotta get into this corridor. But so if you look, right, the street frontage here is nice, but then that's the transfer spot. You can see how many people are there just in this photo. So you go in one more or two more spaces. I mean, that's a nice sunny day, right, in the summer or something with all the leaves on the tree. But you bake there if it's hot, and you freeze there if it's cold, so. The tree plant, yeah, well, as I'm saying, this needs something. So, okay, enough about that. Is there anything else that's glaringly obvious on this map that we say, hey, we need to change this? It's rhetorical, we can come back to this, today's the setup, but this is homework, right? Think about this. All right. With respect to the nodes and corridors. Sure.
Can you explain, number 25, 26 is what low-scale suburban, and then 25, which backs up against Statler and then Delwood, and that's where Westfield is, and the daycare center. I'm thinking that it's misplaced to be a suburban corridor. I'm wondering why it shouldn't, or I'm advocating for it to be a suburban low-scale node.
Okay.
Even though it's not, it's along the street, but it's...
Well, that's the difference between the low-scale node and the corridor is that the corridor are narrower parcels.
Actually, I think both 26 and 25 should probably be more towards the traditional stuff.
Well, that's a question, too. Do you think it should be suburban or traditional?
I think that the way that it is now, it's failing. The businesses there are used by the community, but I think they're really unattractive. It's that old, outdated strip mall model, and being that they back up to a park, there's just all this blight right on the park. It'd be nice to have a buffer of parking between the park and the businesses. Also, school buses use the very narrow road behind it to navigate dropping off kids at the daycare.
I would love to see Millersport go more traditional over time. Both sides of Millersport. In this case, these are the only two spots that we're really working in. And so if you look at, I assume that's Long Meadow, and that's the 5, right? So
right.
6 corner.
Yeah.
So 6 corners, hey, picture a roundabout at the center of that thing.
Yeah.
Then wouldn't you want to hug it with buildings? Makes sense.
Yes, and there are a lot of outdated places that could, if an upgrade came along, it would be nice to be more traditional there, and it would fit with the neighborhood.
I like the idea of making it a traditional low-scale node 2.5.
Yeah.
Any issues with that?
No.
Okay.
On both of them.
All right.
And 25 too.
Yeah.
Just link it together somehow.
They're nodes. I think they're nodes. Because they're
Right.
deep. I mean, that one,
Right.
the one that backs up to Delwood's deep.
It's not that deep.
No, it's deep enough to do a node, though. You don't have to do a corridor.
Right, and you're encouraging foot traffic. Most of these businesses, people aren't staying. They actually walk to them. They walk through the park. These could be more vibrant with more walkable businesses than bringing in more cars.
Yeah, we could link the node together with a couple of the parcels in there that...
I like that.
What's the mass of 55?
55.
Gun club.
Think school. Oh, sorry.
That's gotta be an 8-story building.
Yeah.
I think that's supposed to be a 4.
This is the plan map, the building
Yeah.
zoning height.
Yeah. We're just
Bouncing around the map at the moment.
All right, so we can come back to the map next time if we have any thoughts afterwards. I want to move into the sheets, traditional districts. And I'd like to look at traditional corridor. So again, these align to that village, book that we were using if you want to refer to it. But I actually would like to work on the sheet, this, because I don't think corridor and node should be all that different. Corridors are usually, in a lot of cases, they're adjacent to nodes. The setbacks, those types of things would want to align, but we may have some rear yard stuff that we want to talk about changing. So if you look at, the first, we're going to go through kind of line by line. Buildings located on a primary street shall be oriented such that the facade facing the street will be substantially parallel to said streets. So we have to define primary, but generally speaking, we want to pull in traditional areas facades up to the street, yes?
Yep.
Okay, so same. 75% of the building's primary facades measure linear feet distance parallel to the right-of-way shall meet the required setback distance. Same, yes?
Yep.
Okay. Buildings on a primary street shall have a front setback within the range of 0 to 10 feet from the right-of-way line. Planning Architecture Review Board may allow an additional 10 feet setback. Construction, this is the allowed 10-foot setback for public outdoor uses. Any issues with that? Okay. Front plane of a building, in no instance shall the front plane of the building of any principal structure on a primary street, not including overhangs, be greater than 20 feet from the right-of-way line. Same thing, right? We're talking about the front setbacks. Okay. Building on a primary street shall have a maximum setback of 20 of the right-of-way line or the average setback of the existing principal structures. So if we're okay with the setbacks, we're still talking about the setbacks here. Okay.
That's from the street.
So those are all gonna stay the same. We're through E. Right now, we're staying all the same as nodes. Building frontage on two or more streets shall be determined to have an equal number of primary facades unless said street is classified as an alleyway. I don't know that if in a corridor, do we ever have a time where we have a building in an intersection? Looking at the map, yes, we would, because of 29, sure. So we want the same requirement that they have to address both streets? Okay. Buildings on corner lots shall be set back, oh, yes, same thing on the corner lots that we did? Okay. That's that whole, clear vision triangle.
Yeah, clear vision issues.
Side yards with parking and driveways shall not be more than 43 feet total width. So side yards, we still want to minimize side yard parking where we can, yes?
Yep.
Okay.
In the corridor?
In the corridor.
Only for the bus road.
Well, you want a continuous building face, so...
You could have two buildings on two separate parcels. Then you would be forcing one building to build to the one property line if you did do that.
No, because you could maximum 43 setback from the property line instead of the building. Of course, then you have a massive parking lot in between your buildings, so.
Yeah, so for residential, I'm okay with that distance, but if we have a corridor, why do we want to do separation between buildings?
You don't have to. I mean, 43 was a maximum because we were allowing drive lane plus parking stall. And that's the max.
24 and 19.
Alright. No principal building shall be placed within 30 feet of any residential district boundary. So 30 feet still feasible in this area? Well, and what I'm wondering here is if you look at 17, we go to 17, so can you zoom in on Bailey? What? Oh, I skipped I. I'm sorry.
We'll go back.
Yeah, let's just zoom in on Bailey here for a minute. So if you're looking on the map in 17, which is Bailey's setback, we're not gonna get 30 foot of separation.
You're also not gonna get a building that's very tall.
No, but I'm saying we're gonna have to change the maximum setback for this corridor, right, for the corridors.
Honestly, given what's already constructed there, I don't think anybody would have an objection to like 5 feet.
Can you zoom in on like, let's use the police building just for, go to the Harley.
Well, even Cityscape had 10, right? 5 seems way too
So the
small.
setback, this is the setback from residential, Jackie.
Oh, okay.
But see, what we're saying is, where we got 30 feet in the nodes in like Snyder, there's no way to get 30 feet in a corridor, because if you look at it. So that building's built right to lot line on the back. We're saying the building should come to the front now, with a line of parking probably on the back, my guess, or a drive aisle on the back.
Well, yeah.
Does that leave room for any screening? Any,
We could still require screening.
Yeah, we'll get to screening in a
but
minute.
if you're saying 10 to the lot line, then you really don't have room for screening in the back, right?
You got plenty of room with 10 feet.
Where we
landscape.
From the back parking, from the back lane?
From the back of the building to the back of the lot line.
We're looking at
property line.
Building setback now.
Some buildings aren't gonna get parking behind them, they're gonna have to do side parking.
Most of them are gonna probably do side parking.
So like, there's no way to rebuild this building, right, because it's built back to the back lot line, it would have to come to the forward lot line. The problem we have is we need to put some kind of spacing between the building and the properties behind it. So what which size buffer should that be?
Just Kim, can you just scroll up?
The existing,
Just go up the whole
there's more than
street.
10 feet from the building
Just
to
see what's
the
there.
property line right now.
I mean, they're
It's
all
It's
almost
hard to
at
tell with the
property.
vegetation.
Code Studio had recommended a 10-foot minimum width for the shallow lot transition. So if you take 10 feet, they're saying 10 feet minimum for that buffer area.
So can you zoom in there on the JSP America building? Right, so that's a narrow, that's maybe 10 feet.
Maybe, if that. It's probably just large enough for them to be able to get
6 to 8 feet.
somebody to walk behind there, get in the
So
door.
the current language would say 10 feet minimum
For that transition area.
for the transition area.
So that's the vegetation or wall.
And that's totally separate from a road behind.
If
the
somebody
building or
wants,
anything like that.
if somebody wants to put a drive aisle back there, then they're gonna force their building to be narrower, right?
I thought your question was how wide that transition needed to be in the back. And you're
I
saying it's
was
10 feet.
hearing building setback to lot line,
So
and
Well, that's where it is now.
Yeah.
I understand where it is now. I'm just not, I was hearing, yeah, that's still okay, that's fine, and I think if we're improving, then we should, I think
Oh.
10 for something like this, I suppose, if that's where the buffer is, that seems reasonable.
That would be the buffer. The 10-foot would be the buffer.
You'll have 10 feet
With
between the
landscaping
property
and-
line and building, or 10 feet between the property line and the parking.
So they have the opportunity to leave more of a buffer. They can narrow it up and leave a bigger buffer if they wanna put a car back there, but
Right, because we're talking about taller buildings now, so I think we have to be very, we have to make sure to have a good buffer language for something in a corridor, because we are still abutting residential.
right. Well, and we'll get into the buffer, we did the buffer language last time, we'll get that. I'm just saying, so we'll agree that we can't be 30, we're gonna cut this down to 10. Okay. So then to go back to I, because I skipped it, lots without driveways shall have a maximum side yard setback of 20 feet of combined width for both side yards. So that means that your building, you can't be more than, you've gotta be 20 feet total, so you can shift it to one side or another, but your side yard setback's limited, you can't just create a big side yard. Okay.
Go back to the police building.
Yeah, that's the police building there. Can go, do you wanna go to the plan view?
Probably plan.
Can you go back to plan view?
So, I want to understand, there's residences on the west side?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's say they have a fence right on their property line.
Right.
Okay, and let's say this building, you're gonna build it new.
Right.
So, what's a buffer? The distance between their
property line and where your building can start.
where your building can start?
Yeah.
Right.
That's a buffer. So, that's not enough for parking.
Well, you would have to make your building, you'd have to provide more space if you
More
wanted,
to the
if you
street,
want parking.
or make it narrower.
Yes.
Okay.
These are garages primarily running down,
Yes,
Yeah.
the police building.
right.
Yeah.
I'm just I wanna understand buffer, does that mean it could be also the parking? So if it was 20 feet,
10 feet
No.
is 10 feet.
10,
If they put parking back there, their building's gonna have to get put
Right.
to the road.
but 10 feet, is that enough for a car to go one way? To have one-way traffic behind it?
Well, no, because you're gonna have to put vegetation back there too.
The buffer,
Okay.
buffer is vegetation and
Yeah.
a wall or fence of some
They're
kind.
actually separate from the fire buffer.
Okay, I just wanted to understand, thanks.
So if you flip this page, we're gonna go to K. Accessory structures shall not be greater than 18 feet in height and shall be set back from the property line abutting residential district boundary a distance at equal to the height of the accessory structure. So accessory structures have to be shorter, 18 feet, and they have to, so in this case, right, we said that the accessory structure has to be set back equal to the height of the accessory structure. So the accessory structure here can't be pulled back behind where our buildings, being buildings 10 feet versus 30. Here, do we want to change the accessory structure, or should we be allowing accessory structures in a corridor?
Well, you're always gonna have accessory structures.
Right, sheds, that type of thing.
Sheds,
Shed,
RPG
garage.
enclosures, generators.
So should that just be all 10 feet? Any buildings 10 feet off of the back?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Lots with multiple buildings, this is deals with the pedestrian connections, structures and parking areas. I don't know that we need to change some of the sidewalk language.
I don't think so.
The building shall create a well-organized, accessible, functional site. So be organized to create a sense of place, parking rooms, and landscape islands. We're not gonna have a ton of those because of the size of the parking lot, but if you did big side yard parking, I guess you could.
Well, if you got two businesses together, we could kind of force some pedestrians like that.
Sure. Common shared parking access requirement, is feasible, right, so we're talking about, we want to be able to allow shared parking. Need to determine standards, I don't know what that, so we have to talk about what the parking standard in a corridor would be. So,
We need to determine what the standards are for
Yeah.
parking, but we also, as far as the standards, we should probably have some generic language to provide to these people.
so this is minimum parking, and what we want for minimum parking.
Because like unified development in a current code, which is intended to allow people to share parking and access and all the other stuff, it's not specifically clear of what those easements have to contain, other than they can't be modified without the approval of the town.
We're not gonna get this one today, so I'm gonna pass it, and we're gonna come back to this. Building entry, primary entrance facing the primary street, no questions about that? Okay. Side or rear entry also permitted? Yes?
Why not?
Okay. Entrances shall be of similar width and spacing existing structures on the same street. Okay. Building fronting on non-primary street shall have a primary entrance located facing such street. So, if you have a corner entrance do you have to have, if you have a corner lot, do you have to have an entrance off of the secondary road? These lots are so narrow and the buildings are gonna be so narrow, I don't see a requirement why that would be.
Well, it'd be like requiring the police building to have a corner entry.
Right, what I'm saying, I don't know that that's necessary here.
I don't think it makes sense.
Okay. So we're gonna dump that one. Primary entries shall be treated consistently with primary facades. No issue there. Sidewalks, width of 5 feet minimum, sidewalk width of 6 feet minimum for communicating sidewalks, no issue there, I don't think. Stop me if there is an issue, why don't we do that? Moving on, B, sidewalks. Sidewalks from all building entrances and other sidewalks and parking areas are required. We'll have to get this whole residential subsurface egress question. I don't know if we're gonna have a lot of that in a corridor. I can't picture where we might have that, but,
Don't dream it up.
sidewalks required to be curbed. Sidewalks and parking median islands between buildings is necessary. Okay. Sidewalks to be either concrete brick or concrete pavers. I don't mind having some brick or pavers.
No, it's maintenance issue.
Permeability. Asphalt walkway is not permitted.
Yep.
Okay. All right, design, we're on A, 6A, design circulation patterns to separate vehicle and pedestrian movements. No question. All right, pedestrian connections provided between multiple structures. Design circulation patterns to reduce speed and enhance pedestrian movements. Drive-through facilities in corridors. I say no, but... Now, this isn't, we're allowing suburban stuff around here. These are these narrow little parcels.
You're not gonna get it.
Dunkin' Donuts, Bailey and Maine.
You're gonna encourage vehicular traffic behind buildings closest to the residents, so I would say no on these shallow parcels.
I'm saying no. Do we need a show of hands on this one, or are we good? No? Okay. No.
No banking.
No banking, no
pharmacies, no any of the traditional corridors.
So the bank,
bank is sitting at the corner of the main.
yeah, that's right, it has an ATM and it's just fine.
I don't know what it is.
Look at the building.
Yes, but it's a walk-up, it's, so the Squire building that's being torn down, there is a bank there now that has an ATM.
No, the ATM
why I
has
was-
been gone for a couple of years now.
Oh, all right.
Nobody needs to
Been
drive
over
through
a
banks
year.
anymore.
Maybe
Direct
closer
deposit.
to.
It's closer to, I used to walk there.
No trimming.
I heard no, not in the corridors, but we are allowing those in other places around, but... Oh, look at the amount of land that we're using for drive-through facilities.
Shouldn't it makes sense to shift that towards suburban, that's why we are zoning traditional versus suburban, and why not keep suburban where the drive-throughs are and bring back traditional to the traditional areas that have been identified?
So this is the key, I think this is Key Bank?
The Key Bank's perfect except for the drive-through.
Well, yeah, except I
Look
guess
at,
the...
if you're a
But down-
handicapped
down
person,
in
if you're disabled,
Can't go down to...
you have to cross a double drive-through lane to get from the disabled parking into the building.
If you don't have the drive-through, you're not gonna have the bank.
Not the entrance that people do. The entrance to go in
On Main Street.
is here.
No, that's the drive-through.
That's the drive-through. That's the drive-through, yeah.
You have to cross the double drive-through lane in a
Go
wheelchair.
down to M&T on the other side of the plaza for me for a minute. I just wanna see what they got. You know what I'm talking about? Hang on.
The McDonald's, if you walk in front of that, you gotta
One at a
cross
time.
two drive-through lanes.
Well, wait. Where's-
Domino's.
Where's M&T there?
M&T's right there, it's in the
That's right
plaza.
there. Now, do they have a drive-through anywhere?
Yeah, it's in the middle of the plaza.
Oh,
Yeah, they're over there.
Kiosk in the middle of the
Right.
parking lot.
So if we're trying to encourage pedestrian
All right.
traffic, and we're trying to encourage people to use mass transit, subway, the line's going to be extended hopefully, why wouldn't we discourage drive-throughs? Why would we be encouraging cars? We want to discourage cars. We want to encourage mass transit and pedestrian traffic.
That's the worst drive-through in the world. The Domino's.
Domino's has a drive-through?
I agree on this.
Where is it? Where is it?
The pickup window.
Oh.
Where you gonna allow pickup window?
No.
Drive-throughs are antithetical to traditionally developed.
Yeah, you got Dunkin' Donuts down there.
Just trying to design for
All right,
Again, consider those long, narrow corridors, we're talking about a corridor. Imagine a long linear drive-through that has stacking for 16 cars, noise, fumes on someone's back lot, which is a residential use.
anybody have an issue and wanna vote on this?
Okay, when we had the discussion about drive-throughs in the nodes, and you said, okay, we don't need a drive-through there because other places they can go.
Yeah, we do.
Is this corridor the other place they can go?
No, the other places they can go are all the suburban stuff.
As I'm sitting here thinking about this.
On the Cheektowaga, Clarence, City of Buffalo allows them.
And Brian A.'s comment about Generation Z, I'm sitting there thinking about my kids, all their friends. I honestly don't think they've ever walked into a Starbucks.
They don't They drive through.
That's the problem.
Everybody drives
Starbucks
through.
is relocating because they want the damn drive-through.
Right.
They have the perfect location on Main
Right.
Street.
Like, you wanna see drive-throughs, go down to where T-Mobile is, across from the university in Buffalo. There's drive-throughs everywhere.
I would also say that the proliferation of drive-throughs in Amherst is problematic. There is that backup all the time. Think about the Walker Center, think about all of the lights and think about the the Tim Hortons, any Tim Hortons. The lines are the laziest humans that are waiting in line in their car.
I just hit my horn and shame them.
And it's everywhere. It's proliferation, and this is the time to say no more, curb it. So we want something else.
I agree. I agree.
You can say not allowed. They come to ZBA if they want something.
This isn't today, this is the future build. This is like, okay, you can have your drive-through.
We're doing this for our kids, and our kids aren't doing it now.
Okay, so the spot where
What the hell are we trying to do here?
the spot where we're gonna have a question is when we get into like 13 and 12. But I would agree that in corridors, like 27, 29, 31, 17, that we'd be okay saying forget about it. In the higher density stuff, maybe we can phase them in.
So we don't let them in nodes. And
No, we don't let them in we've only gone through traditional nodes and we're in traditional corridors.
But my only concern is,
Traditional
you're
nodes.
talking about a tech corridor now, down Main Street,
Yeah.
over to Eggert Road.
Right.
Nowhere in there is there a drive-through.
Show me one drive-through at Harvard Square in Cambridge.
Well, I don't know if I can or not.
You can't.
I could show you a bunch of them right here, though, that are across the street from the university, and I think, the only thing I'm saying is, and I'm not advocating for it, I'm just saying there are certain uses that you plainly will not get in that area if you don't allow it. And just think about that, that's all I'm saying.
And just think about, look out the window right now.
But then you might encourage, like, who wants to be next to a Tim Hortons right now? Some businesses may say, no, I don't want all that traffic, I don't want that smell. So,
Dan would like to be next to a Starbucks.
this may encourage a whole other kind of development. I think there's a flip side to it.
I like being next to Starbucks without a drive-through.
That would smell nice.
Your comment about, someplace that's not here, days like today, nobody's gonna be walking to any friggin' place.
we can't help that we live in Buffalo. There's weather, we have weather, but we live with it.
Yeah?
Like, particularly near the university, this is the highest pedestrian area of the town. Like, it makes complete sense to get rid of, drive-throughs.
Yeah, but we're way up Bailey here.
I would just point out too that not everybody can walk, and I'm always considering families that have very young children that might have a hard time getting out of a car to stop into a place.
Okay, what do you
And
think?
actually, when we had the discussion about this before, we said that we would put it in the traditional when we took it out of the node.
Well, we took it out of the node.
But we did talk about it being in the
Okay.
traditional,
So-
which is why we
My
labeled
suggestion
some.
is by special use permit in the corridor.
Maybe there's some standards, maybe there's some design standards you can impose
Sure.
in this area for those.
Drive-through by special use permit.
Well, the drive-throughs currently in the ordinance actually have special requirements.
Show us you can do it really well,
Yeah.
and explain why you have to have it.
Yeah, like, in the case of Domino's,
Yeah.
it's not, there's no speaker. You call, you drive up, pick the thing up, and you're
I'm
out.
okay with that, no speaker box.
Yeah,
By special permit. All right. Anybody object to doing it by special use permit? Not because of workload.
Okay, special use permit, yes, but that laundry list of things that they have to hit has to be tight.
We now
And-
have to hit a design criteria.
Be like, so,
Okay.
and they have to meet all of them.
So we're gonna have to have Code Studio put together design criteria for drive-throughs and by special use permit.
So-
And lots of shells.
I'm not trying to be smart, but there are standards in our code now for some of this stuff. I would say, take a look at that.
Okay.
And if you want to expand on that, those came from Code Studio too, so.
That's fine, we can pull those for next time, but we're by special use permit with design standards.
Well, Dan, in regards to that, the current regulations.
And I got
drive-throughs
architectural review board triggers here, right, because we're in traditional?
You do.
Within certain.
I got architectural review
residential,
board triggers.
You couldn't meet on any one of these lots, it'd be impossible.
Right.
It's like 150 feet for a speaker box.
Yeah.
Yeah, which meant they, in the case of like the Starbucks that's moving, when that one came in, they had to come in with a special type of speaker system that.
Listen, there's a lot of Starbucks that are around that don't have drive-throughs that do very well.
I know.
Every one of them is fast.
Thinking about pharmacy.
Let's do it we're gonna do it by special use permit with design standards and architectural review, right? Okay. All right.
I don't think our inspection should be part of that.
Well, architectural review is triggered under traditional corridor, because all the traditionals are triggering architectural. So,
Traffic safety, that should other boards be looking at it too? Because if all of a sudden you're interrupting a very densely,
They see them, every site plan.
yeah, site plan
They see
review referrals. So, yes.
only by request though, I mean, we have to ask.
No, mandatory
They see it.
traffic safety.
All right.
Okay. We're moving down to 816B8, driveways and access. Shared entrances and exits should be provided when feasible. Yes?
Yeah.
Cross-access among adjacent properties is required unless proven infeasible. Yes? Sure.
Conversation about A. So we're saying they should be provided when feasible. This would take a little time to think through. But, this is really critical on corridors, right? Like, this is where we run into the opportunities for cross-access agreements and things like that,
Right.
that, you know, they serve best in the corridors in a lot of ways. Should we, I was gonna say, should we be looking for something that's a little stronger than
It
this?
says is required unless proven infeasible. Oh, A.
Well, I think,
It says when feasible.
I think your agent, your other,
Shared, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear A. So, shall be provided when feasible.
No, shall be provided, period.
Shall be,
Let them determine that it's not feasible.
Or let them prove it and let them accept,
Shall be
let us
provided.
accept them from it.
Okay. Shall be provided.
Your curb cutting regulatory, or regulating that anyway.
Yeah,
DOT can't control DOT.
You don't always have agreement that you can share, so by saying you have to,
Shall be provided unless proven infeasible.
I'm good for that.
Okay. Got it. B, yep. Okay. All right, land, we're moving to C. Land must be reserved for future connections with adjacent properties for cross-access.
Yeah.
Okay. Flipping the page. 24-foot max driveway width for driveways outside public right-of-way.
Yeah.
Okay? 5-foot wide sidewalk to be provided between driveways and buildings.
Yeah.
Driveways to have 5-foot or greater setback from side yard or principal buildings. Shared driveways not required to have 5-foot setback, obviously. Loading docks, bays, and staging for service areas to be located in rear. This would have to change, because you might not be deep enough to do this.
This is something.
Okay, we can't always put the loading dock in the rear on...
You put it in the rear on anything on Bailey, you're gonna put it in somebody's backyard.
Yeah, I agree. Any issues? Okay. Loading areas to receive appropriate screening from street or residential district, that's still okay. Staging, storage, I'm moving down to D, staging, storage, maintenance, and parking of vehicles, equipment, or materials not allowed in front yards, and is screened from streets and surrounding properties, that's still okay. Dumpsters only allowed in rear yard and shall be screened from streets and adjacent properties. We might have to dump the rear yard, but we can keep the screening.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and must be behind the principal, or behind the front of the structure.
Behind the structure?
Behind the front.
The face of the structure.
They can't be up adjacent to the front face, so they have to be set back.
Well, if the front face of the building set back from 10 feet from the road, which is the
They have to be
maximum,
back further.
it would have to be behind the front face of the building.
Okay.
I just don't want it ending up in the front yard.
Okay, I agree.
Is that, it has to be on the other side of 10 feet dumpsters?
Well, you could do
Yeah, you still can't back a dumpster up. Okay, so that's a good point too.
Right, we have to keep it away from residents.
Dumpsters should also be 10-foot rear setback.
Yes.
Okay.
You want
Any resident, but from any direction, right? Not just rear, any direction?
And
Yeah, so-
don't the dumpsters need to be in a position where they can be emptied?
Right.
So that might affect where they're placed, depending upon the configuration of the
Right,
lot.
so what Scott's saying is they have to be back of the front face, and what Alyssa's saying is that they have to be 10 feet off, which is, what Scott is saying to that is, they're considered accessory structures, so we already made accessory structures a minimum of 10 feet off.
Not inside the buffer area.
Not inside the buffer area.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Dumpsters are enclosed, constructed of similar materials to principal structure. Okay. Dumpster height, 1 foot above all elements stored inside.
No,
No?
I want the dumpster to be higher than I want the
Oh, sorry.
enclosure to be higher.
This is worded incorrectly for notes as well. Dumpster enclosure height to be 1 foot above all elements stored inside. Yeah. That should be changed back in the node.
Language that, puts preference for just using garbage totes. Like in urban areas, a lot of the smaller scale and, 2.5-story buildings.
They still have to be in enclosures by our code.
So the issue...
And they actually have to pay additional fees to the highway department to
But I mean,
pay the additional totes.
if there's language in there to incentivize it as far as preference, versus, hearing a dumpster dump, when you're fairly close to a residential neighborhood.
So the issue becomes the nuisance of 2 days a week totes sitting outside of business, on a lot of totes, versus versus the once every 2 week dumpster dumping sound.
Yeah, and the other problem with totes, if you have a business that's only Monday to Friday, and your garbage pickup days are Friday, and they don't get there till 2 o'clock in the
Then they block
Sit there
the
till
sidewalk.
Monday.
Yeah, and in a node like this, they tend to block the sidewalk.
If they use totes, do they have to recycle? Or if they have a dumpster, you don't regulate what they throw out?
They don't, even if you have totes, you don't have to recycle.
But if they had totes, they could recycle versus,
You could get a recyclable dumpster.
They could recycle even if they have a dumpster.
You could also get a dumpster and still do recycled totes. But,
But it's just saying the refuse containers have all gotta be in enclosure, no matter what.
okay, so dumpster gates do not face building entrances and adjacent residences. Goes without saying. Dumpster gates remain closed unless refuse pickup or delivery, okay? Stormwater ponds not permitted in front yards.
You're not gonna find too many
Right.
stormwater
No, it's
ponds
not
in
gonna-
these corridors.
All right, moving on. How are we doing time-wise? We've been here for an hour.
We're okay for a bit.
Okay. All right, no stormwater detention shall have a permanent pool, and the use of riprap stone fill is not permitted. But we're not gonna get this often in a corridor. Stormwater management facilities integrated in overall site design. Use of subterranean storage for stormwater runoff is encouraged where practicable. Fencing around stormwater facilities must match primary building materials.
How the heck, I'm still trying to figure out how fencing's gonna match a brick building.
Brick fence. I don't know.
You know that place on Walden, they have a vinyl fence that looks like brick, they have one that looks like stone.
You know what this is if you're gonna provide a wall around a detention pond, then do what Damon did and build a small wall so that people aren't going into your detention pond. Most of these places are gonna have such shallow lots, they're not gonna have a detention pond.
No, I'm just thinking back on one. I think we could just scratch that.
Probably. Use of green infrastructure design elements are encouraged where practicable. Stormwater and green infrastructure facilities shall complement the character of the primary street corridor. All green infrastructure design elements maintained regularly. Utility connections, it's because I like to see if the microphone picks up the sidebar comments after I say something. Utility connections in ROW provide connections to site structures, appurtenances where feasible.
Can we back up one?
Yep.
The elements regularly maintained, what does that mean?
If you have a if you're saying, hey, this is green infrastructure, and you let it go to weed, it's not necessarily green infrastructure. You have to maintain according with your plan. If you say, I'm gonna have X amount of cattails to remove X amount of nitrates and pollutants from stormwater, or absorb X amount of stormwater, you can't just let that.
So this, okay, thank you for...
Or in the case of like grass pavers, you can't let the grass die and just become mud,
Okay,
become
but I'm just wondering...
runoff into the storm system.
This is the place for something like that in this code?
When in doubt, remind them. Yeah, I mean, basically what we're saying is you're not just agreeing to provide green infrastructure, our expectation is that green infrastructure has to be maintained and actually functions.
Part of the stormwater permits now, a lot of stuff requires bioretention, stuff like that, so they're coming up with swells and these things with cattails and other stuff that...
A land use attorney once told me we needed to put that into the code, so that's why it continues to...
Okay, because I always thought that might be a building department enforcement issue.
It probably is.
Okay.
Engineering, okay. Utility shall be, yes, it should say. All right. Utility connections and right-of-way provide connections to site structures, appurtenances where feasible. Utilities to be located inside or rear yards and screened from view.
This must have been part of the
Yes, I think this should say underground subgrade utilities should be provided where practicable or where feasible.
Man, we want, actually, as a town, I think we want everything coming in underground anymore. We don't want overhead electric lines, we don't want overhead phone lines, we don't want trees taking all this stuff out.
That's good, but this applies to the property itself, it's not gonna,
Right.
not gonna fix the stuff on the street.
No, it's not gonna,
But on
it's
the
to
site-
start by...
On the site it does, yeah.
Yeah, because the hardest part about bringing utilities underground isn't getting the utility company to do the vaults, it's the tie-ins. Every business up and down the street then has to do a tie-in through the basement and rewire their building, so that's the problem.
So if you
start this path,
just tell them that that's where everything's gonna be underground.
then someday when you go to vault it, everybody's already got the tie-ins, let's upgrade, so.
I think you should be specific about overhead connections. I mean, you don't necessarily need a transformer underground in a corridor, but you would want an overhead service connection to be underground rather than overhead.
Just, you know what, just thinking about that.
When you think back to the October storm, especially in the area we're talking
We're
about
gonna
now,
want that everywhere.
where they were without power for 10 days because of all the overhead lines that went down.
So I think we're all in agreement on this, but we need to write some language, so we're gonna task, Scott. We'll put some language together here. All right, good. So penalty for making comments. No, I'm just kidding. Flipping the page, going to A. Parking in rear or side yards whenever possible, 5 foot of greater rear and side yard parking setback. So the building setback is 10, parking can be off of the rear side by 5. Okay. Existing parking in front not to be expanded. Good. 10 feet or greater side yard, setback for ROW, this is on, for right-of-way, 5 foot or greater side yard parking setback from side lot line. Side yard parking allowed on corner lots, side yard parking on corner lot, not primary street, must front on the non-primary street. Front on, we're missing that.
This is where we're getting into, we're gonna see a lot of side yard parking lots
Yeah.
due to the lot configurations.
We already have them in these corridors, so. Is there, I mean, we can drop parking minimums, but Bailey, you don't have on-street options.
Nope.
This is side yard parking only allowed on 401?
It's only allowed in the corner lot.
Side yard parking shall be screened from street. Parking screening includes a structural screen to complement the primary building along with landscaping. Side yard parking must not be more than 30% of total lot width. Parking is centralized in shared parking rooms of no more than 50 cars each. You know, we're really gonna see this unless it's a big shared parking facility. Shared park access and parking among adjacent properties on primary streets require internalized traffic circulation.
Brian, can I back up to
Sure.
Is F feasible on a corridor?
Is F, what?
So side yard parking may not be more than 30% of the total lot width. I'm just wondering if that's feasible.
No, that's a problem, I'm with that.
Total lot width.
Yeah.
Your width is, well, your width measured from the primary street,
Well,
you're
I'm
gonna be,
not sure what this refers to, I'm just thinking just in general, if you got 100.
you're not your lot depth, your lot width.
Right, so
Yeah.
when we're talking about corridors.
I'm just thinking corridor here, like where Dan's headed with this, is say you've got a,
They got parking in front too, though. Yeah, I'm just wanna, can we think about that one a little?
no, it's gotta be higher, 'cause right now, if you
I think so.
stick with the current parking standards, you basically have 2 square feet of parking for every
Go to Bailey and look at this.
1 square foot of building. So
Bailey has
it's about
front parking,
2/3 of the lot would be parking
Not the
on
blue
the side,
space.
'cause if you
Yeah,
built
it
the
does.
building on one
It's got
side
side
of it.
parking.
It's got it in front too.
Well, parking racks are gonna be brought down though anyway, aren't they?
Well, we haven't gotten that far yet, they're not gonna be 0.
You could look at the police building, so that's your 30% argument right there. Right now, you got about,
Well, I'm willing to live with some other standards.
85%, maybe 90%.
Angie, you all high standards for parking requirements for buildings, but
I'm just,
what they are, I don't know specifically what they all are yet.
yeah, I'm just throwing out, we need to take a look at that a little.
Go north, go north.
Those standards keep being brought up. I think it's a good idea to maybe have them presented in one of these meetings,
What
so
is
we
family
can have
tree?
an idea.
Yeah.
That big lot next to the restaurant?
Well, the restaurant's pretty big. That's about what it's gonna be.
We need,
That would be a side yard parking.
there are some spots where we need significant side yard parking, like the police building.
It's gonna be well in excess of 30%.
All I'm saying is, let's take a look at it. I think it might be a little restrictive.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yes.
I think it's gonna have to be close to it.
I don't,
Is this a good case for have a lower requirement, have them come in to ask for more? So that you can...
So we're gonna have our own police department come in and ask for permission so that they can do why we bought the building? That makes no sense.
Zoning's not retroactive.
Right.
They don't have to, as long as they don't touch anything, they can do what they want.
They're carving out the shell, right? They're not expanding the building?
They're gonna be doing work in the parking lot.
this is a standard that was intended to apply to nodes, right? And I just think corridors are a little different.
The other scary piece of the puzzle here is that towns are exempt from their own zoning, so municipal buildings are exempted from your zoning code.
I mean, I think if we're moving towards lowering the amount of asphalt in town, then having a more conservative number and having people come in and ask and justify why they need more might...
Wait, are we talking about maximum parking?
Well, the side yard parking, and we're just looking at the family tree for an example of how, that site in the relationship to building the parking, you could probably the maximum should be raised to about 60.
Well, so here's the issue.
75 would make it safe.
So I'm saying but the scenario is if you've got a parking minimum on a business or on an entity, and then you say 30%, right, is your required parking, and somebody says, I can't feasibly do that on Bailey because there's no on-street parking and I need more parking, they're gonna come in and ask for an area variance.
Trying to avoid doing that.
Well, why are we afraid of it?
Well, we can raise the percentage.
Otherwise, everybody would build a building that looks like this. Right?
It's just one more hurdle to redevelopment of these older areas too, though. That's one more risk you gotta take to go to the ZBA to get a variance.
But that's what the ZBA...
No, Sean Hopkins makes quite a living doing it, gets, 95% of what he asks for?
Well, stop saying yes.
Well, zoom out.
Well, that's fine with me, but we have a criteria.
Brian, what is wrong with that type of development if you were to accept 50%, but as long as it has other enclosing elements to enclose the parking lot?
I mean, under today's standards, that parking lot wouldn't be asphalt, property line to property line. There'd be green space and stuff there.
What I'm saying is, if I said, okay, I want this extra parking, and I know I'm allowed side yard parking, and I know I'm allowed side yard parking at the corner, but I'm only allowed 30%, and the town would rather see the building built to the corner with the parking on the opposite side. If you gotta come into ZBA, well, suddenly there's a reason to have a conversation, right? You could make it an administrative function, and administratively, we could allow for more parking, but, the thought that we would just blanket allow somebody to build that, even if it was screened.
What if then you made a condition that if you have a situation like that, you have to build to the corner?
That was...
Well, and that's the, don't get me started.
I'd rather not have the zoning board continually offer relief, because that shows that you need to change your law.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the code if you gotta keep sending people to the ZBA for stuff. I mean, for example, if you look at, what's the name of that bar?
Look at the liquor store for a minute.
Bogies. It's asphalt, it's about half and half, yeah.
Alright, go to Bogies.
On both
Zoom in
sides.
Bogies.
It's right across from Lamont. Just zoom in a little. That's all parking on both sides of the building.
Can you drop a guy on Bailey facing Bogies? That's why. That's walkable Bailey.
I guess the question is, what do we want to be there versus trying to, continue what's there already, right? We're looking towards the future, not...
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's
I'm not arguing with you, I'm saying that I think parking needs to be reduced.
But the parking's all side parking on these sites, 'cause it's building the whole way back. That's
But
what
why
we're
do you have to
kinda
have more than
forcing.
50%? Or why do you have to have more than 30%? That building is there's less area in building than parking. And I'm gonna go off on one more tangent here for a minute. Nobody assesses parking lots to create property value in the town of Amherst. What's assessed is buildings and the betterment of the building. So, you can have all the parking you want. You could look like Northtown Lexus. None of that's of any value except for the building that's on the site. So if we're trying to add property value on the west side of the town of Amherst, let's make it a little harder for people to build parking. 'Cause that crushed gravel parking lot is completely unnecessary.
Particularly if they can share parking with the neighbors.
Well, where's their lot line? Probably some of the building, right, some of the middle lots, probably.
Right, so if you want more parking, share it with your
That's actually a
neighbor.
different site. That's a vacant site.
So I'm saying, share it with your neighbor. That's fine, then each one of those sites gets 30%.
But you look at the bogey site in itself right now, and building to ratio, it's about 2/3 or a third.
You also need to think about, I'm not gonna go to places if I can't park. If I get there and there is nowhere to park,
Then they won't open if people can't go there. They're gonna, the building, the property, the tenants are gonna demand parking. And if the landlord says, I need this tenant, I need more parking, it's infeasible, where's that person gonna go? To the zoning board to ask for a
well, we
freaking area
just
variance.
said we shouldn't have everybody going to the zoning board to ask for more parking, so I think we need to do something larger
disagree.
than 30.
If you want more parking in one of these small traditional corridors, go to the frickin' zoning board.
All right, so the ZBA says
ZBA says no.
Great.
Business, business isn't there. Okay, move your business, I'm not gonna be there.
Fine.
So you don't, fine, so we don't have a commercial business.
Somebody else doesn't wanna be on that spot with less parking?
I don't know.
I don't know, this seems like a perpendicular to the new, tech corridor, so that might be a place where buildings start going up, and they're all taking transit and subway and whatever. I mean, the future is hopefully a walkable neighborhood. Pardon me?
They're not all gonna be doing that. We have to have some parking.
Can we have permission to look into this a
We're
little
at
bit?
30%. The Village of Williamsville has buildings that are with restaurants moving in with zero parking spots. Share does just fine.
Using this
Warpath
example,
is great.
there's actually parking
Machetes is
on a side
wonderful.
street right there. I mean, there's parking right across the street. And most of these bought residential areas, and yeah, all right, fine.
Leaving it at 30%, which is consistent with what Williamsville allows. All in favor of leaving it at 30%. Okay. All opposed? Great.
You're discriminating against people with disabilities.
No, because the people with disabilities still have to have dedicated parking spaces.
Yeah, but you were talking, well, lots of these places are only gonna need one. and that doesn't cut it, which is why I said then we have to mandate that they have to have at least two.
We're applying the village code here, right?
Take the village.
This is not the village, and these corridors are not the village.
It's not the village, but...
They're not going to be, because they're not gonna have this historical parking that's provided behind buildings along the corridor. They just don't have it. Every man for himself out here. I would like the opportunity to kinda just dig into it and see if we can figure out what it might be if it's not 30.
Is there an opportunity to create parking on Bailey similar to what the city has? And then that would then negate the 30%, it would just be up to finding a parking spot like you would on Hurdle or something like that?
Well, I also want us to anticipate the complaints when people are parking on the neighborhood streets because they can't find other parking. We already get those complaints constantly.
We get at least 2 of those a month at traffic tickets.
All right, here's my last question on the subject. We obviously can revisit this because we're producing a draft. My last question on this subject matter, Bailey currently allows people to build as much parking as you want. How freaking good is Bailey as a commercial district? It's not Williamsville. How freaking good is it performing? There's a freaking vacant lot between those two buildings. It's been vacant for years. How good is it performing, and why are we afraid of change? If somebody can tell me Bailey is outperforming other places with less or with more stringent parking standards, I would say, well, then we should emulate Bailey.
I don't see why we can't compromise somewhere in here.
Okay, Brian, so 30% is what? Parking is 30% of the buildings?
No, it's side yard parking. Means big, you can park in back of your building if you wanna make your building narrower, park in back. Side yard, massive side yard parking.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, so we voted, we're moving on. Okay. Shared parking. Shared parking access, parking among adjacent properties, primary streets, required to internalize traffic circulation. Great. Shall investigate shared parking and access between adjacent properties. Shared parking counts towards off-street parking requirements. Okay. Going to page 7. 15 minutes. That's the goal. All right. Shared parking analysis required for shared parking to demonstrate feasibility. Any issues? Must submit legally binding shared parking agreement. Shared parking does not require 5-foot side yard, side setback and buffer requirements, obviously. Parking in rooms no more than 50 cars. Parking rooms to have 6 to 10 foot wide landscape medians. I would probably drop this one.
The current code, you're not gonna get it.
You could in a big shared parking requirement, or you might over in the restaurant with a crappy parking lot.
Yeah. Family tree, you might have a big enough parking lot. Keep it.
Okay. Pedestrian walkways with vegetative medians.
We'll just use these stuff together.
Drive aisles traverse perpendicular adjacent plane of building. That's really rear, I would take this one out.
What does it mean?
That means that your parking needs to, your drive aisles need to, yeah. Yeah, so we have to be, yeah. So we're dropping that one. Parking designed for cross-access and internal access management with adjacent properties. 6 to 10 foot wide landscape islands required for parking rows with more than 15 spaces in a single row and 10 spaces in a double row. Okay. No more than 10 spaces in perimeter aisle without a break. Planning and Arc Review Board may approve deviations of medians and islands. No problem there. Minimum 1.5 off-street spaces per 1,000 square feet of non-residential space.
This is where we got...
ITE standards, yeah, okay, we're looking at IT or ULI. Same thing with this question, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, the 1.5s, I think, is ULI. 19 feet by 9-foot parking space minimum, no issues. Use existing code language for the design of parking garages. Probably not gonna have a lot of that. Concrete or stone curbing for parking areas, sidewalks, landscape islands, medians, and buildings. Asphalt curbing is not permitted. Protect pedestrian and foundation areas from vehicles. Town may ask for plans for snow removal. Utilize existing town code for the landscape overview. I'm not gonna get into these real deep here. We're gonna flip the page. Move down to D4. A. Parking in rooms no more than 50 cars. Wait, flip the page. Oh, sorry, I'm back on 7. I'm moving pages. Page 9.
Trying to win that one.
I am. I just won it already, I think. I dropped a mic. It was great. We're going down to site landscaping. We're using the town code. Town code, town code, town code.
Go all the way to heaven.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay.
Not for me, it's for the people that are gonna watch this.
So we're using, so we're gonna skip ahead here to page 11. Yeah, because we're all landscaping, Jeff's reviewing it, and we're mostly using town code. So we'll get our review from our landscape architect. We're going to page 11, F2, architectural consistency, building and massing. Page 11.
Everything's gotta look like bogeys. We're good.
New buildings must relate to proportioned massing scales surrounding valued historic forms. Contemporary interpretations of historic character and forms can be utilized for new buildings.
Brian, this is where we're cutting, a lot of the buildings throughout here don't have any historic.
Yeah, I'm wondering if in the corridor, if these two don't apply. I think we're still gonna tell them how to design different portions of the building, but we're gonna ignore, I think we should ignore these two.
Yep.
We're gonna ignore A and B.
Well, it depends how we write the regulations.
Well, if we're still in traditional, why aren't we requiring traditional forms? I mean, aren't we?
We're not gonna be able to establish a historic content for some of those areas?
No, but we would, an upgrade would be, an improvement.
So what we're saying here is we're going to allow the rest of the design standards to set the tone for the building. Because we are gonna get into fenestration, we're gonna get into all of that in a few minutes, right? I think this is, we're not in a historic, for the most part, we're not in a historic corridor.
Right, so you strike historic, but we want best so that's what you're saying, we're gonna get to that, okay.
Yeah.
So this is your brownstones at Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
If we write this, we get the brownstone. If we keep it, we're telling people build it like KFC and Pizza Hut.
No, it's okay, we're good. We're gonna get into in the instances where front facades are greater than 50%, right? Buildings with front facades longer than 50 feet shall be broken up by delineations and treatments.
Yep.
Yes? Good. To avoid blank walls, buildings shall incorporate fascias, canopies, arcades, setbacks, recesses, projections, etc. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. 2.5-story max, 36 max height. Okay? First floor height not less than 15 feet. Okay. 70 feet minimum rear yard setback from residential, that's out. That's out, yes. 10. Okay, flipping this page. We're down to 16F3B. Solid void ratios, we're gonna look and see, what our solid void ratio ought to be in this area, but 25% minimum for upper stories, existing, is the existing code, so. Next, right next is the frontage on primary streets. Primary streets, 70% of wall area is transparent between 3 and 10 feet. Still good with that, right, setting the storefront.
We're gonna drop the side of it.
Side street's gonna have to drop, yes. So we have to wrap the building, well, it's a percentage though, still though, so your sidewall area is gonna be less. So your 30%, if you wrap it less, if you wrap it 10%, it's gonna be a really small window.
Yeah, but it's one of these, I'm looking at buildings, there's out here, thinking about, yeah, Bogus is on the corner.
Well,
The restaurant component and everything's in the back of that one.
yeah, but I'm saying you're still percentage, so if it's on the corner and the building's shallower, your percentage just gets shallower.
Yeah.
So I would leave it alone.
Yeah, we'll see how it works.
Visual distinction between first floor and upper floors on commercial buildings. Solid to void ratio of 15 feet minimum ground floor height applies to residential buildings as well. No large banks of walls facing the street, drive, or parking area. Not large blank walls.
You gotta dump it.
Why?
Because you might have your parking area on the side of the building.
Yeah, but why do you have to have a blank wall facing that?
We just said you don't need a doorway on the side.
Yeah, but your wall doesn't have to be blank.
Well, 30% of it is gonna be.
Like this building here, right next to Apple Auto Glass, whatever that building is next to it.
30% is gonna be carried.
Right, but then after that, you want a blank wall, otherwise you end up with that thing.
It's not.
Go to Street View over, no, the one next to Apple Auto, yeah, right there. Yeah, right there, that one. It's like, we would want to avoid that, right? Sure, they're filled in.
You could put a blind arcade in there, right?
Well, but I'm saying I wouldn't want a blank wall. Look at that. You gotta have some kind of treatment. Right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want that.
You need something to break the massing up, not necessarily opening doors.
This just said blank wall. This doesn't say anything. Right. No blank wall. Entrances for residential units face primary streets and have direct access to sidewalk. Okay, moving on, page 13. Picked up momentum here. Either that or I just stopped looking up to see if anybody wanted to stop me. Residential units at ground level can have front porches that are covered or distinguished to provide visual separation from street. That's good still, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Formal building base to distinguish ground from upper stories, unlike this, yes? Good? Okay. I'm talking about the blue one behind it. Continuous base treatment along facades facing streets and parking areas. Base on all primary facades and complements of the architectural style of the building. Base. So you can't just put a strange base that doesn't work with the brick or whatever. Masonry block foundations shall not be exposed and will be adorned with finishing materials in character and base or architectural style of the building. Okay. Windows are scaled and proportionate to...
Foundation is brick and your walls are brick.
If you have a base of brick foundation in the ground?
Oh, no.
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 Oh.
The labor will kill you. The labor costs will kill you.
Yeah. Okay, moving forward. That's a variance question. I really want to have a brick foundation.
We're assuming this code's for this century.
Yeah. Uh-oh. All right, Windows are scaled in proportionate to overall architectural style of building. Windows are trimmed with appropriate material to add definition. Building additions receive the same rhythm and ration of solid ratio of solid of void existing.
I really do not want the facade bogies repeated.
I think this is referring to when there's an addition.
What's the building addition? Do I want this to make a blank wall?
Okay, so we could dump this one because we're giving them the solid to void ratios. Windows should wrap building corners. Roofs should have design details for an added level. Roofs should have design details for added deep level of detail.
We're going back a couple more sentences. We're going to require gargoyles.
It's the same as the D.
Flipping the page down to D, cornices on buildings with flat roofs. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cornices. Well, something that's defined. I think cornices. Well, that's what the cornice is. Good to leave it. Yeah. It's either like that blue building has a cornice.
What is both?
It's the roof, look at it. It's got the tile on the side.
Okay. Overhangs and canopies should be consistent with the building. Yes. 16G5. Entries act as important visual features and cues. Entries act as yeah, that was so, you have to call out the entrance. Doors and entries at scale and proportion building. Okay. D, primary entries shall be detailed and highlighted with architectural features so it is evident from the street, encouraged for all other entries as well.
Otherwise.
Buildings and structures constructed with durable materials. Changes in materials at inside corners, yes. Residential units at ground level, no, I moved, I know. All right, 2 pages left.
Bring her home.
Primary facade materials shall be wrapped onto secondary facades with no less than 10 feet or what is architecturally consistent. Yes? Masonry block walls are prohibited. Okay. Decorative masonry materials can be...
In the corridor, no masonry walls?
It should say exposed, and it does say on primary facades. Standard masonry block walls are prohibited on any primary facade. I'm sticking by this one, we're not changing that. Decorative masonry materials can be considered at the discretion of the Architectural Review Board.
Well, that is covered.
Okay. Exterior materials for additions and rehabs shall be consistent with the existing and adjacent structures.
Do we really want a red brick?
No.
Concrete block wall?
It's just about being consistent with what you just built, right? So you don't want a tack on that looks like a piece of garbage.
This is saying if you put an addition on this,
Yeah.
it needs to resemble something.
Do we want the addition on the side of...
We're talking about the future, when this all gets rezoned, hopefully this will be a 2.5-story building with lovely cornices.
But this is calling out an addition.
This is an addition to an existing building.
That otherwise beats the standards.
Existing structure, no?
I don't know what to do with this one.
If they put on an addition, doesn't it affect their grandfathered status and they have to bring it into compliance?
You're allowed to put an addition on of X amount of square feet. I would agree, we dump this one. Because the addition's still gonna have to comply with all of the other design elements.
Yeah, the architect's borough gets it.
So we want the addition to actually be better than the building that you're adding to.
Actually, this would probably
Right.
take it out of the traditional nodes if it ever...
No, because we have more traditional buildings that they can add on to there. All right.
Then again,
the Lewin building, I'm not sure what that refers.
Following materials and systems shall not be utilized. We're using all of these still. Okay. East shall not be utilized as a primary building material, except that there may be a discretion to the Architecture Review Board for decoration on upper stories. Okay. Site lighting designed at pedestrian scale. Fixture heights between 8 and 20 feet shorter along sidewalks and taller along parking lots. Fixture shall be dark sky compliant. Amber hue lighting is not permitted. Lighting directed away from adjacent structures and property lines. Fixtures mounting aspects determined based on minimum requirements necessary for area lighting.
Right. Use the existing concept again, yeah.
Yep, building mounted lighting complementary to character building. Building mounted lighting shall not be used in place of pole mounted lighting.
Here you may run into a problem with that.
I agree, because you might not be able to fit poles.
I'd rather see the lights mounted to the side of bogies and light standards in somebody's back area.
I would dump this one. Building mounted lighting should be used for safety. This one goes away too, if the first one goes away. And...
The lighting standards, but goes away.
Yeah, that D goes away. E goes away.
So E'll stay.
No, D stays.
Why is D stay? It would still have to meet the requirements.
It just won't, C won't work. So we'll take C out of this one. Wall pack lighting shall not be placed on primary facades. Standards, 2, D, and E also apply for accent lighting. Neon accent lighting is not permitted. Building accent lighting, I wouldn't say in the corridor, maybe in your... Yeah, I would take it out of here. Building accent lighting shall be discrete and consistent, the T, with the building. It's grandfathered. Accent lighting shall be highlighted with architectural details and illuminate entire facades. Good? All right. Well, we did manage to accomplish this thing today, so I'm going to motion to, Seeing that there's nobody here from the public, I'm going to motion to adjourn the board meeting. All in favor?